This week, President Biden released a set of reforms for the Supreme Court. But does the court need to be reformed? And what's driving this attempt to remake the High Court? Attorney, constitutional scholar, and senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, Ed Whelan, joins us to discuss. Ed, the reason the administration is giving for these reforms is that President Biden believes that no one is above the law, whether it's the president or the Supreme Court. Before we get to specifics, Ed, is that really the point in issuing these proposed reforms now in the heat of an already overheated presidential election?
Well, I think that particular claim applies only to the constitutional amendment that President Biden says he's seeking. An amendment where he hasn't provided the text at all. We have no idea what he thinks the position of the president or former president ought to be with respect to immunity. But look, it's clear this is a political doing by President Biden. He's made clear he's not happy with how the Supreme Court has ruled. He's not happy that it's been faithful to the Constitution on matters where he has views that are unfaithful to it. And he wants to make this a campaign issue.
Let's get to the specifics. There are 3 reforms President Biden is proposing. Here he is at the LBJ Library in Austin.
First, I'm calling for a constitutional amendment called No One is Above the Law Amendment. It holds, and I mean this sincerely, it holds that there's no immunity for crimes former president committed while in office. I share our founders' belief that president must answer to the law. The president is accountable in the exercise of the great power of the presidency. We're a nation of laws, not kings and dictators.
Ed, while this sounds fair, is it constitutional? And what is the game here? Is this another stratagem to get Donald Trump?
Well, if it's done as a constitutional amendment, then it's by definition constitutional. Of course, it's far-fetched that it would ever be ratified in our lifetimes. I think it also obscures the fact that under the Supreme Court's decision, presidents, of course, remain criminally liable for their personal conduct, for conduct that is not official. And it also ignores the fact that there's some pretty thorny issues about where one draws the line between core official conduct, where I think almost everyone agrees there ought to be some sort of immunity, and other matters that are in dispute.
Yeah, well, and that immunity swings both ways to Democrats and Republicans. I mean, it's an odd thing for the president to propose because in one way it limits his freedom to execute his own office as a separate branch of government. But let's press on to this next proposed reform. Listen.
The second thing I'm asking for, we've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well.
Ed, term limits, is this a good idea? Or does this politicize a branch of government designed to be apolitical?
Well, ultimately, I think it's a Rube Goldberg type idea. No one quite knows how it would play out, but I would emphasize 2 points for now. Insofar as this is done via statute, which seems to be what President Biden has in mind, it is blatantly unconstitutional with respect to existing justices. There's a more complicated question whether it could be applied to justices in the future. But as to existing justices, there's no way that it's constitutional to impair the justice's lifetime tenure by demoting him or her to some sort of junior varsity role after 18 years. There's also a glaring problem with this, which is the whole approach seems to assume that the Senate will rubber stamp any president's nominee. That's the only way you could get this regularity that President Biden touts as an advantage of it. If a Senate says no, then what happens? And of course, you can have justices who die somewhere in the 18-year term. You can have all sorts of things happen. So look, President Biden is disappointed that Ruth Bader Ginsburg hung on a lot longer than people wanted her to, and that she died during President Trump's term. He's obviously very upset over the composition of the current Supreme Court. Republicans and conservatives worked for decades through the political process, through these legitimate means to build this court we have. Democrats should try to do the same.
It's interesting. They're upset about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There are a lot of Democrats upset that Joe Biden, stayed through his full term and just his term. But the real question here, Ed, is this an attempt to pack the court, to add justices to the court? I mean, if you're appointing them every 2 years, wouldn't that give him the free? What if you don't have people within the 18-year term limit? Do you just add justices?
Well, it absolutely is an effort to pack the court by displacing the senior justices on this court. Again, it can't possibly do that constitutionally, but that's the goal. Now, if you had this system from the beginning, maybe it would be a good system. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe you could implement it 30 or 40 years from now via statute. That is, since it would apply only prospectively to future justices. It would take a long, long time to get those 9 justices into their 18-year slots. But it's clear that the motivation right now is that President Bush is upset with this Supreme Court. This is a political reaction to the court, an effort to reconstitute the court through illegitimate means for political advantage.
Okay, let's go to this last bite. Watch this.
The court is not self-policing. The court is not dealing with the obvious conflicts of interest. We need a mandatory code of ethics for the Supreme Court, and we need it now.
Ed, why don't they just mention Justice Thomas's family and Sotomayor's book deal here? I mean, aren't there already ethics rules in place?
There are ethics rules in place, and we don't quite know what this Biden proposal will consist of. Again, all I know of it is a brief paragraph or two in a Washington Post op-ed, which has no details at all. There are a lot of difficulties in the details about how you actually would implement such a procedure, how you would subject Supreme Court justices to some sort of enforcement scheme imposed by their subordinates or by someone else. That's highly problematic. But as you point out, the basic rules are already in place. And, while people will sort of contend willy-nilly that they've been violated, I think it's very difficult to show that there's any case, say, in which a justice has taken part in which he or she shouldn't have. If you wanted to point some out, I suppose the biggest example would be Ruth Bader Ginsburg taking part in election cases in 2016 after making very strong comments against Donald Trump in the midst of the presidential campaign. Comments she apologized for, comments she never should have made, but comments that once she did make, arguably required her to recuse from those cases.
Yeah. Ed, this all seems, this entire renovation of the Supreme Court by President Biden, this seems like a violation of the separation of powers and a brazen attempt to politically tie the court down. I mean, who's going to rule on its constitutionality?
Well, that's one of many reasons why this would never work. I don't know what he has in mind. I mean, this is a proposal that cuts against what his own commission recommended. It's a proposal that he's making right at the tail end of his presidency in what everyone seems to acknowledge is his dotage. I don't understand what the game here is, other than to, I suppose, try to help Kamala Harris campaign against the Supreme Court.
Ed Whelan, we will leave it there. You can follow Ed's work at the Ethics and Public Policy Center at eppc.org. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.